Zach.
All right.
Oh, man, you blew it. You talked over. I was just going to start it, and you talked over it. Zach.
Bill.
How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. But I also have to say hey to Amanda. Hey.
Hi, Bill.
So I feel like, there's always those kids that when you start school and they're not there on the first day. And then they kind of show up like a week or so later. And even though they're there for the rest of the entire year, they're never really part of the class. They're just sort of like that new kid that comes in late. And that I kind of feel like that on this show now. So this is GROADIO, right?
Well, welcome back. Welcome back, Bill.
And I think since, we sort of teased it a little bit, Zach, you and I, we kind of conspired behind Amanda's back to get her to be a full-time host on this thing. And she really had no other answer, no other recourse except to accept that. So Amanda, congratulations on your co-hosting duties of the GROADIO podcast.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited. This should be fun. It was fun listening to you guys, and it was cool to do the couple episodes with Zach, and I think it'll be fun to have the curious noob in the mix as well this time.
Yeah, the pressure is definitely on me to kind of, not break up what has become a really good thing. I feel like it just sort of took off after I went to China and Colorado and other places.
No.
So we'll see how it goes.
Well, but we agreed that you play the curious noob well. You ask good questions, and you seem genuinely interested in it, and you seem to embrace the spirit of the Groad, even if you're still just kind of the curious noob.
Well, here, listen to this. So, I think this is going to play right into our first topic. When I was at the Breck Epic, I started before the Breck Epic started. I spent the weekend in Steamboat Springs. Working at a team camp, cyclocross camp for Alpha Bicycles, and all of the roads that they were riding on were the same ones that were in the Steamboat Gravel race. So I am familiar. I am familiar with this course.
I mean, were you riding with them at all? Did you get out on your bike and experience the Groad yourself?
No, I had this sweet Barbie Jeep that I was driving around in.
Oh,
it was amazing. The Gladiator.
So since you were technically there, can you give us like a how were the rocks? What was this kind of gravel like?
I would say that this was a smooth riding gravel. However, it did get broken up into what I would call more like almost cow paths, like some big rocks and grass, in the road as well that really tested the Barbie Jeep on for bits of it. But as far as them on their, I think they were just on straight cyclocross bikes. I'm not, Zach, you're gonna have to help me with the difference here. But yeah, they seem to ride them fast and easily.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's not too much of a difference between a cross bike and a gravel bike, but interesting that they probably had the 33 mil tires on. I'm guessing they didn't stop to throw on some 38s or 40s to deal with these cow pastures.
Well, that I'm a stickler for these things and all things tech, so I can tell you with 100% accuracy that I have no idea.
I mean, did it look skinny or did it look really fat? I think that's kind of
I honestly, I'm gonna have to. You're gonna make me go back and look at my photos now because honestly, I could not tell you.
Okay, all right.
So,
all right.
I guess what I can add to this is, hey guys, I was there.
Yeah, nice. Hey, wait, we weren't, so at least you have some insight on the dirt, even though it translates into nothing for us. But thanks. Anytime
well,
I can help.
I mean, Bill, I think if you're going to be, if you have a future in reporting, I think you need to come up with, those adjectives to describe the gravel, right? Amanda, there's pea size, and then golf ball.
Yeah.
Gnarly, just use words like gnarly.
I did though, Zach. I did experience what your one of your major concerns, being the empathetic person you are at Dirty Kanza, of trying to get from spot to spot in front of the riders as they were going, and trying to just sort of crawl along past them to keep the dust at a minimum. So I did learn that from you, for not like just flying by people and just crushing them with a cloud of dust.
Well, I think Amanda and I talked about that on the previous episode. We were talking about the potential of broadcasting Dirty Kanza, and that was one of our concerns. And I don't think I brought it up, but like there was one of the Jeeps at Dirty Kanza. Colin Strickland was at like mile 180, and he just rips right by him. And I have this picture of Colin coming out of like a cloud of dust. I'm like, that was kind of rude. Like that's not cool. I don't know, Amanda, you've experienced it. That's kind of not cool, huh?
Yeah, no, no, we talked about it last time, and I think that's a big struggle, is trying to find that fine line of like documenting it, but not affecting it. And I think the dust plays a big role sometimes in that. And we've seen in the past at Dirty Kanza people starting the ride with like bandanas around their face, just knowing it's going to be that dusty. And even some of the pictures that I saw from SBT when they were in the like lower plain field looking areas, like Will Matthews has a picture and everybody's just coming out of this giant cloud of dust, and I was like, oh man, if you have any sort of like breathing allergy problems, that would have been like such a mess. But yeah, it's definitely a fine line, but I think that they're getting better at being able to like travel around and get to those places, and there's a lot of the same photographers at these events now, and I think that they probably have their methodology down at this point.
You say that, I don't, but okay, all right. Well, so maybe they do. Maybe I should get some tips from Will and some of the other folks. So are we going to start with Steamboat, Bill? Was that the segue that you were making here?
That's what I was shooting for. Yeah, Steamboat,
and
so for people
good.
that haven't caught on yet, that would be the SBT that Amanda is talking about, and that was I'm looking at the clock right now. It 354 days and 14 hours until the next edition. So we got a little bit of wiggle room to get this recap in.
Well, so that one was kind of its thing is it was new. It was a first year event, and it still made a pretty big splash. And we're talking about it here on the GROADIO podcast. So they obviously did something to make it an event and make it something that we want to chat about. Yeah,
for sure. So kind of looking for the results here, but what going into this? Was there anybody going into this that was a favorite, or does that? So I don't know. There's so much stuff I have to ask here about how this stuff happens. I know that okay, I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but I do want to talk about calendars at some point. But we're going to talk about this race first. So what do we have as far as who was racing and who was favorites, and who are you looking at, Amanda?
So on the women's side, I was expecting Amity Rockwell to have a little bit better of a showing. I think she finished in the teens or 20s. I'm not quite sure if she had a mechanical problem or not, but yeah, that was kind of one of my big surprises. I saw Cycling Tips came out with an article prior to the event trying to do what Zach does normally with these preview articles, and did a big focus on the women's field, but more specifically like the roadies that had entered that were kind of doing it as a tune-up event to the Colorado Classic that was the week after the event. And so as soon as I saw that article, I was like, well, a roadie's probably going to win. And considering the prize purse and how much money they were putting at emphasizing the pointy end of the field, that isn't what ended up happening. And yeah, do you want to talk about the results, Zach?
Wait, that isn't, it was Roadie who won the women's race.
Yeah,
oh,
that is
okay.
right.
Sorry, I misunderstood. That is what happened.
Yes, that is.
Okay, you said isn't.
Yeah. Oh, Sorry, it is what happened.
Okay,
yeah.
yes, you confused me. Well, and from my perspective, Gravel Worlds was the same weekend, and Lauren Stevens, who's a pro road racer and also the partner of Matt Stevens, one of the top gravel racers, this is like the second time she's signed up for a race and then not done it. So she had signed up for Gravel Worlds, and I was like, oh, that's going to be really cool. She's going to have a great battle against Allison Tetrick in Nebraska, but she ended up doing it. So it was the two teammates from Tibco, Silicon Valley Bank, in Brody Chapman and Lauren Stevens went 1-2 at the front of that race. So, like you said, and I think Lauren might have had a mechanical reading the race report. So, it might have been a little bit different if mechanicals hadn't gotten in the way. But as you know, from pretty much any gravel race, mechanicals and flat tires are very much a part of gravel racing.
Yeah, and it was cool to see Brody Chapman win. She's Australian national road race champion, I believe, so it was pretty cool. And I know she said in an interview afterwards that they went there to win, so that was the goal, and that was what she did, and went away with some pretty good money. Sarah Sturm was third, which I thought was pretty awesome. She's been doing a great job of, rustling up the podiums in some of these big events this summer, so it's pretty cool to see her get third there, especially after getting second in Leadville, I think. Which is pretty impressive. Yeah, and in fourth place, Alexis Rachotz, I don't know how to say her last name, but she actually wasn't entered in the pro field, I guess. She was like in the age group rankings, and so that's why like the pro podium doesn't actually include her, because she had entered herself in like the age group one, which is pretty cool that she ended up getting fourth overall. And then in fifth, Allison Powers, she obviously a pretty big name on the road scene. I think retired from road racing professionally and just coaches now, so it was pretty awesome to see her in fifth. And then in sixth, Nina Laughlin was first at Land Run in March. She came out here with CTS. They did like a camp leading up to the event and pulled out that fifth place podium spot for the pro field, which is pretty cool.
Well, so that's an interesting point. I mean, they had the big prize purses. It was, I think, $5,000 to the winner of both the men's and women's, and $2,500 for second, and maybe $1,000 for third. Like, that's pretty big compared to what road races are pulling this year. And we had talked on the previous episode of GROADIO about when we would see more of the women's road teams doing gravel. And so do you think, I mean, it seems like if we have more prize purses like this would be a major motivation to see more of those, to see more teams sending their riders to races like this, and especially ones that are favorable to, more or less road skills. So basically anything that's kind of east of California and Oregon, it seems like those are the kind of races that might favor, road racers versus the gravel racers who are racing out west.
Yeah, and Belgian Waffle Ride was another example of this, where the prize money brought out some more of the talent from the road teams, and I think that's a big motivator on the women's side. I know that CX Magazine put out that article that woman wrote about the change in the women's fields over those different gravel events in the past 5 or 6 years. And a few of those are definitely influenced by money, and a lot of them are influenced by marketing campaigns and kind of showing that, these events are really good challenges for women and that sort of thing. And I think that at the pointy end in some of events like this, it's definitely money that has influenced some of that change in speed and talent, I guess, that's showing up as well.
Yeah, but there's still in that top 10, a number of familiar names that we've seen all season, though, as well. So, our gravel friends, Casey Armstrong, Sarah Max, Lauren DeCrescenzo came back from her broken collarbone at DK. Hannah Muggy, her teammate, did Belgian Waffle early this year. So some familiar names that are also, on that result sheet in the top 10. So the quote-unquote gravel racers still representing out at Steamboat.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That women's field, definitely.
What about somebody like Casey Armstrong, who was racing? I would call her a mountain biker over anything else, but it seems like that's not normally the type of person. I'm just looking at the other results when we get to the men's, like Payson McIlvain is in there as well. These are riders that I was seeing all summer long in the mountain bike world, but it really doesn't seem like those skills transfer over as much as coming from road.
Yeah, for definitely. I mean, I think, I would have expected Casey to have a better result there, at least better than 40 minutes back from the win. But yeah, it's different. I think that on the men's side, it kind of is only just Payson as well, so I think he could just be considered an anomaly. And if you look at Crusher and the Tusher, like Evelyn Dong won that, and she's, pretty focused mountain bike racer. So I think it's different. It's also course specific.
Timing on this one also played a huge part of it, because I think what they were hoping, there was a lot of recruitment going on from the promoter of this race with the Breck Epic, hoping that a lot of the riders who were just finishing up Breck Epic would stay that extra day, because that finished on Friday, and then they stay and then race this race as well. And I know like Kabush was he did it, didn't he? He was out there.
He did, yes.
But and he was one of the few, I think. But I know Russell Finsterwall was thinking about it, but ended up not doing it just because Breck Epic is just such a killer. And racing at altitude for that many days in a row and racing hard and then turning around and doing stuff like this, I think is probably it would take a special person or a Canadian like Kabush to be able to pull that off. The one interesting thing, once we just mentioned Payson, he was he was putting in training days riding with people during the race for a Breck Epic to get ready for that, but wasn't actually racing.
Oh. Are you allowed to do that?
Hey, open roads.
Oh, okay.
Open trails.
Bill, to your point, I think one thing that maybe I was a little surprised about was just kind of like looking at the profile of the Steamboat race. It seems like it was, generally speaking, kind of a 2-climb race. There was a climb, you're on a plateau, you went down, and you climbed again. So, I think for the mountain bikers, they're all really good at climbing at altitude. So if it had been different, if there had been more mountain climbs, if it had been more up and down, you might have seen that favor that skill set as well. But at the same time, some people are just really good at riding their bike. They just happen to be mountain bikers, or they just happen to be road racers. So, I look at like Payson, like he's crushing gravel. He clearly has a skill set that's built towards doing these long endurance races and going hard for long periods of time.
Yeah, the other interesting thing, and I wonder how this plays into it for other races, and even if races can be broken down like this. You talked about altitude. This is 6,700 feet, which is up there, but isn't necessarily high altitude as far as racing. What I learned from I'm being able to talk to you quickly like this right now without having to stop and take a breath every 2 seconds like I was doing in Breckenridge. But here, you're down much further. You're 4,000 feet lower. So it doesn't seem, it seems like that invites a lot more people to be able to compete. Are there any like huge gravel races that are at altitude?
The Crusher and the Tusher, which was in July, I think. Amanda, starts at like 8,000 or 9,000 and goes up to 11.
Yeah, it goes up to like 10, 11, yeah.
Yeah, and that one is just like...
That's legit.
Yeah. There's some people that are just like, that's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I'm never doing it again, solely because of the altitude, not the challenge. Oh, Amanda just raised her hand, by the way.
I've done it once. One and done.
Yeah, as opposed to like a DK is probably like at 500 feet maybe.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's other issues involved with DK more so than altitude.
Sure. For sure.
True. But that being said, that's why when I saw that Ted King won Steamboat, I was shocked, because I know that he doesn't live at altitude. So I was really impressed with the fact that he came away with the win on that one. It was supposed to be a very close finish. Like Payson said, he double leg cramped at the top of the last climb and like barely kept Ted in sight to the finish. Had that not happened, Payson probably had the upper hand in a sprint finish. I was super surprised and impressed that Ted won that. Payson ended up being only like 80 seconds back on him, and the guy after that was like a little over a minute behind. So it was still a really close finish, but I was just impressed that Ted was able to put himself in the hurt locker to win.
So Amanda,
yeah, let's run down, I guess, officially what happened in the men's race. I guess Ted King winning it, and Payson McIlvaine after that. Jacob Raffi, is that right? In
Yeah.
third place, and then our gravel star Colin Strickland there in fourth, with Jonathan Baker fifth. Any surprises or any standout rides in there other than what you were just mentioning, Amanda?
I'm a big fan of the Morton brothers and their thereabouts / outskirts films. And they did an outskirts. The second film that they did with Rafa, they brought Jacob Rathie in, and I watched it a few months ago or so. And so it was really cool to see him get third here. I had to actually Google his name and go back, and I was like, I think that's the random ex-pro they brought on that epic ride they did in Canada, and it was. And in that film, he talks about how he had a really hard time with his road racing career because he had a really big upsweep, like a ton of really good results in the beginning, and then he just like dropped off the face of the map in terms of results on the road. And he retired, went to go work a job, but still keep riding his bike. And it was a really cool story, and so I was really impressed to see him get third here. So that was kind of a good feel-good story for me. And then Colin obviously still has his fitness and finished fourth, but could have very easily taken the win as well because it was still close.
Yeah, and then the old men start showing up. Got Moninger in there in sixth place. A couple things that just looking at names that I noticed. Matt McClune, got to give him a shout out. DC guy, the strong road racer around here. Last saw him actually in Hagerstown for Road Amateur Nats, and he finished 13th on the day ahead of Tom Danielson, and then Jeremiah Bishop also coming out from Virginia. And then, so Kabush is there with Jake Wells, and then I also noticed a couple of cyclocross guys there farther down, Yannick Ekman and Alan Krugoff. Seems like there was a little like Boulder group ride going on right around the 30th place there.
Well, did you guys catch Kabush's little social media thing? It's not a gravel race if Kabush doesn't do something on social.
Exactly.
he's just keeping the purity of the sport alive. Be it aero bars or people with doping suspensions.
Yeah, so I mean, if you missed it, basically him and Tom Danielson ended up off the front of the group, and Kabush tweeted about skipping poles and not doing work in that little duo. And I guess it didn't seem like a dust up, but it definitely made its way onto my timeline, and people were talking about it.
The only other name there in the men's that I do want to mention, just as a little crossover push, because I'm working through my my heat check power rankings for cyclocross, and there I don't want to tip my hand. Jamie Driscoll may be under consideration, coming back from injury, doing a lot of these gravel rides. It seems like now gravel is if cyclocross is how people are now getting ready for road racing, gravel seems to be the way that some are getting ready for cyclocross racing. So it was good to see Driscoll out there, top 40 finish here. I know he's done some other events as well. So good to see him back in racing.
If we're going through the results, another one worth mentioning, we talked about Lauren Stevens finishing second. Matt Stevens raced Gravel Worlds on Saturday in Lincoln, Nebraska, and he finished fourth. And then he got in his car and drove the 600 whatever miles to Steamboat and raced on Sunday in Steamboat. Whoa. And finished 21st. Yeah.
So you could actually do both. Wow, this is
it's physically possible.
Matt Stevens proved it was physically possible to do both. I haven't heard from him though.
He is the Deion Sanders of cyclocross. I mean, of gravel racing.
But is his team going to be? I watched that 30 for 30. Are people? I wonder if his team is disappointed in his decision. Just kidding. The Pan Racer.
We're going to make Amanda have to go look up what we're talking about now.
Google something later.
So Amanda, I have a question for you. I mean, gravel is known for its laid backness or whatever, but there was a little bit of a rivalry, I think, between Ted and Payson that's starting to spring up here. I just kind of wonder, Ted is finishing this season strong. How much do you think Ted King wanted to win this race? He finished second at Land Run to Payson in a sprint. He finished right behind him at DK. Do you think that was a thing, or is Ted's so retired now he might just been like, whatever?
Oh, it's totally a thing. I mean, even though he's retired, he's still extremely competitive, or else he wouldn't be doing all this stuff. So I think it was a big weight off of his shoulders to take a win this big. And yeah, especially I'm sure he was annoyed with Payson all season long, just like, get this kid out of here. Yeah, so I'm sure it was great, and he was excited to win that. But yeah, it's cool to see all these big names at different events and be able to have these conversations now, because so many of them are going to the same events, that it's fun that we can see these battles play out kind of in different venues now.
It's the big Red Bull versus Untapped Maple, rivalry.
Whoa, you're right. I like this. This rivalry might have some good layers to it, because I'm guessing we'll be seeing these guys racing against each other next year too.
Yeah, what's the better prep for racing gravel? What's it going to be? It's going to be Red Bulls or syrup.
Yeah. Well, Ted's kind of outnumbered though, because Colin Strickland is a Red Bull athlete as well.
Yeah.
So when Colin's up in the mix as well, Ted might need to recruit another Untapped person and get a helmet too. He needs like an iconic helmet.
It's a plaid helmet. All right. Tell me what this RPI is on here. Oh, do we want to? Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped right over. We sort of mentioned Gravel Worlds there for a second. First, it seems like, and this is a continued little bit of tension that seems to be happening in the gravel world as far as scheduling goes. I know you all talked about it before, but you have almost this like grassroots type event, that Gravel Worlds, that has been out there for a while, and then you have something like SBT that obviously has some money behind it, has some big sponsors, is able to bring in these bigger names, and I just wonder. It seems like this is a really good microcosm of what might be happening in the gravel universe on a bigger scale of some of these smaller events maybe getting pushed out. And you were talking about the laid back aspect of it, Zach, and it seems like this kind of works against that.
Yeah, I think that was a thing. I know Amanda and I were talking about it, and I think you're more in touch. We talked about how you're kind of like royalty in Kansas in Emporia, but I think you have some strong roots in that the Midwest area. But yeah, I think it's a new thing. This is certainly the first time we've seen this big of a race. I mean, there's races that have payouts. For example, Crusher, I think, gave $1,000 out to winners, but they really downplayed it. At Crusher, talking to Burke Swindlehurst, he's like, we kind of put it way down on our website. And I was like, yeah, I couldn't even really find what the payouts were. But, for Steamboat, it was very much a part of their advertising pitch. But the question is, does this money exist? I mean, they were giving out 30 grand total payouts. And Bill, you put on a cyclocross race. We've seen the challenges of putting on other races. Does that money exist to put on more races like this, or is this kind of like a one-off thing?
I think it seems that you talk about cyclocross, and I think that cyclocross is a much harder animal to deal with when it comes to big money sponsorship, unless you're going to have a either industry sponsor or product sponsor come in, or car dealership that is willing to put up that kind of money. I think the thing that these races are able to take advantage of, when we see it with the Epic Rides mountain bike races as well, is that they're destination races. And if you have a destination race, and you have a destination that, like Steamboat, that relies on people coming in, then I think you have a better opportunity of getting money from the tourist boards, getting money from the state to be able to offer that kind of prize money. And I'm not positive for this, race, but I'll bet that's part of what's going on here, and that's how this money is able to be offered.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is that it's a tourism thing, especially in a destination town like that, because they're trying to convince people that it's a cool place to come and ride your bike, and throwing money at an event like that and proving that people will come out there and ride a really long distance means that in a few months from now people can schedule a vacation and go and do the same thing and ride on their own. So that's probably the justification for money coming from the state or the city, whatever, to boost it. But it definitely took a lot of big names away from Gravel Worlds, more on the women's side, surprisingly. I think Tetrick was the, dare I say, only really big name in the women's field that raced. And even as far as a couple months ago, I was under the impression she was going to Steamboat. So I don't know if it was a last minute decision that she decided to defend at Gravel Worlds, or if she felt like that was something that she needed to do, was defend her title. But yeah, I mean, even at what I had last heard was that the poll had even happened for her to go over to Steamboat. So it was nice to see her stay and do Gravel Worlds. I didn't even know she was going to do it until a few days before the event. Zach texted me. So yeah, it was great to see her. I mean, she finished 26th overall, which is impressive. And second place was almost an hour behind her. So that shows you kind of how much of a field was taken away and kind of put more at Steamboat, because they had a little bit more money to influence that women's field there. But second and third were pretty close together. And it looked like they had traveled to come to that event. So it was good to see that as well. And I think third place, I looked her up. She's done a few cross races, so it was nice to see some cyclocross racers in there as well. But for me, on the men's side, it was so awesome to see a local guy win. I think that's something that, used to happen a lot at Dirty Kansas. It was all king of the Kansas guys would always win the event, like Dan Hughes. They were the kings of Kansas, basically, and they were the ones that would show up and win the event and had this really giant local prestige. So it was really cool to see. Maybe it happened because a lot of those top guys ended up going to Steamboat, but it was awesome that John was able to pull away and win that sprint finish at the end with Eric Marcotte, which, even that in itself, the top 6 guys in that race were still pretty close together, and it was fun to hear how that played out for them. So even though the fields were split, I think it made for good stories on both sides in the end.
Yeah, although officially, I think John just moved to California. I talked to him, but he's from Lincoln.
Yeah.
He is very much a local guy, and I think he
that
finished
still counts. That still counts.
Fair. Yeah, no, he's the favorite son, and it's funny because I talked to Bob Cummings from Panaracer Factor team at Dirty Kanza, and he's like, "Hey, just so you know, we've got this guy." I was like, "Dude, I know who he is. He finished 4th at Gravel Worlds last year."
Yeah.
And John went on, and I think he finished 11th or 12th at DK. And so it was really cool to see him win and be able to, get some attention, because he's been slowly improving. He won, I guess, the unofficial first race of the year, the Texas Chainring Massacre down in Texas, which I think I was posting about as I was on the way to Worlds for cross, which was kind of weird, right? You're covering gravel as you're on your way to cyclocross Worlds. But Eric Marcotte too, former road race national champion. So and
I was going to tell a quick story. When we first started Dirty Kansas, on the beginning rollout part, maybe 9 miles in, Eric was next to me, and he hits this giant pothole in the road, and his entire saddlebag falls off of his bike. And he just abandoned it. And he looked at me with this panicked face of should I go back and get it? And I looked at him, and I was like, you just need to be really careful on your tires until you get to the next checkpoint. So I don't really know how the rest of the day played out for him, but that was my only interaction with him, was his oh shit moment, because he lost his entire saddlebag. Yeah, it was hilarious.
Lesson learned on making sure that thing's attached firmly for the next time. I'll bet it didn't fall off for a Gravel Worlds.
Probably.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how he finished. I think he might have fallen off, but he was in that group of like the 8 or 9 dudes that were, they weren't apparently did not have enough of a sense of urgency chasing off after Kellen Strickland as they should have. But he was in that group with the EF and the Trek Segafredo guys. But I don't know if he had a mechanical. But third place too, Tristan Ewell and his glorious mustache were also in the mix, and he finished third at Gravel World. So. He's been racing. He's been having a really strong year. He had a really strong week out at the Oregon Trail Gravel Grinder as well. So I think he's a guy to watch. Does some cross too every once in a while.
Yeah, single
some mountain
speed,
bike.
Former single speed national champ, I believe, in cyclocross.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's just kind of my point. I think there's people in gravel who are just really good at riding bikes. Whether it be long distance, short distance, cyclocross, gravel, mountain, whatever. It's a discipline in a lot of ways. Seems to favor people who are just good at bike racing.
Yeah, for sure. And just to put a pin on what I was talking about before with, or what we were discussing about the sponsors, looking at the SBT sponsors. I I was like, oh, it's got to be a tourism board or something like that. Presenting sponsor, Canyon, which makes complete sense. I mean, that's kind of the way that they are heading now, right? With trying to sell bikes that people can ride on different surfaces, and especially geared towards that gravel crowd. And I think Amanda and I had this discussion when we weren't recording, just about how it seems like a lot of bike component sponsors and everything else really are starting to focus in on this market, especially since road racing is not as popular as it used to be. Cyclocross may be popular, but it's a super small market, where something like gravel, you're getting these marathon type fields out there and a lot of people and big participation, and that's where these bike manufacturers are going to go. So it's not really a surprise that Canyon is sort of offering up the most funding for this. And then if you look down into their silver sponsors, the next roll down, you do get like Steamboat Resorts and Paoli Group, which is a real estate group. So they are picking up that money as well. But that seems to be really what's driving this. One is like the bike industry finding a new market, and then also, as we said, there are these destinations and the Community Agricultural Alliance. So let's not leave them out either.
Well, so Bill, I think having these two events on the same day does definitely create a contrast of the two different routes in gravel. Do you know what the main prize at Gravel Worlds was? What they were racing for?
Belt buckles always seems like a solid guess. A vest.
It was a sword.
A sword.
A sword.
Whoa.
So Gravel Worlds is
like
hosted
that.
by, I know, right? You never would have guessed it. It's hosted by a really cool group in Lincoln called the Pirate Cycling League. And so they just totally lean into the pirate theme throughout. So last year, I think part of Allison's motivation for going might have been the chance to get another sword. Because I can tell you, I was there last year. She was so friggin' excited to get that sword.
Yeah,
Nice.
no, it's awesome.
Nice.
But in terms of it's a group of 2 or 3 that put it on. Corey Godfrey and Craig Schmidt are the 2 guys who kind of started it, and they literally started running it out of their basement with postcards. It got to the point where Corey was like, "Look, Craig, I know you love getting postcards every year, but we have to make this a little bit more official for registration." But they're very grassroots. They find volunteers to help. They've basically their aid stations. Several of them are just like local people who wanted to just give out supplies to people. And I know one of the things, talking about the agriculture board, they raised money for a local baseball field this year. So that's how grassroots, Gravel Worlds is that they go to these small towns and
I love it.
they just tell everyone to bring $5 with, and drop people $5 when they give you your pickle juice and Cliff Bars and whatever else. So I think that's cool. It's a cool aspect of it. There's that community sense where they're literally like helping build baseball fields.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great place to have cross practice. Would you classify the race winning Pirate's sword as a cutlass?
Last year was.
Okay.
So when I talked to Corey earlier this year, he was literally like taking a week off work to go sword shopping. He's like, dude, I'm going sword shopping. The other thing they had people who had done all 10. I love that
you have an answer for this.
He's like, just so you know, Zach, there's different kinds. There's the cutlass, there's the sword. I'm sure there's like a rapier, you know. Oh yeah. Well, Corey's really like me. Corey is like, I think he might have a PhD like me, so he's like a pretty smart dude. But then they were talking about getting a blunderbuss themed prize for the 10-year people.
Oh God, I love it.
Yeah, so it was, and Corey himself actually, former DK200 winner. So a little bit of trivia back in the day. I was I stayed at his place, and I was like, I walked upstairs, and I was like, is that a Dirty Kanza 200 winner's trophy? And he's like, yeah, it is. I won it back in, I don't remember what year. Yeah. So cool story about him as well.
Man, all right. That's a good legacy there for that race.
Bill, at DCCX, do you guys give out any themed prizes?
We just have medals made that with our logo on it. We're not giving out like, rejected bills or anything. What we should do is just sort of like brainstorming on the spot here. Maybe give out like pens, like have a signing ceremony. We just give out different pens for everybody on the podium. That'd be a good one.
Well, I mean, Bill, if you're gonna be the curious noob on a gravel, theme is a big throughout throughout the years. People love to embrace the themes, and we saw a shark race, a gator race.
What do you mean a shark race and a gator race?
Well, there was a race called Baitin' the Shark, and the prizes were shark themed. And
Texas Chainring Massacre is a pretty darn good name. I like that.
Yeah, very creative.
Yeah,
it appeals to wasn't that an '80s movie? Kind of appeals to your yeah.
Thank you.
Bill was on fire tweeting about Huey and the Lewis in the news last night, and I think he's on the hook for Colin Hay tonight.
Yeah, so look for that. Get up on my minute.
Go back
work.
And look for that tweet storm from Bill. Yeah.
Amanda's just shaking her head.
Just writing other stuff I gotta Google.
But I do. We have other things on our list, but I've been just itching to pick Amanda's brain about this, and so here's my first question for you, and maybe it is, but throughout the summer. Well, okay. First off, when does gravel season start? Let's get right into this. Your non-official cycling discipline until you fight about when other disciplines fight about when your season is supposed to start and end. So, what is gravel racing season?
I have an opinion. I'm curious to hear what Amanda's opinion is.
My opinion is it starts with Land Run, but there are beginning of March, usually around St. Patrick's Day. But there are a couple other events that happen before that, like in February. So it kind of is never ending. It is more of like a March to October-ish kind of season, in my opinion, but at the same time, there's events all across the country depending on the weather. You can still race through winter in some places. So even Rock Cobbler is an event in Bakersfield, and that's always in February. So you could argue February if you wanted to, but then, we're pretty much looking at the whole year at that point. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it if we're looking at the national level, I would say that Land Run kicks it off. And I mean, and I'm probably pretty biased here. I can't necessarily think of races coming up past the one this weekend with Rebecca's Private Idaho. But, from a national level, I think you could make the argument, especially since we're Cyclocross Magazine, we're totally biased towards cyclocross. So it works well to make it the end of the season.
Yeah. The only other one that ends later is that Grinduro in California, is in October, and that's one that usually overlaps sometimes with some cross racers. But yeah, so like February, March into September, October, probably.
So my next question then is, is there a major race every weekend in that time, or are there gaps throughout the season?
We talked about it on the previous podcast. I think there's about one a month.
Okay.
And so
Major
you have
one, yeah.
one. So you have March right now is Land Run. We need one in April. So if someone would like to apply for that,
Barry-Roubaix.
oh, Barry-Roubaix. All right, so
Yeah.
Barry-Roubaix is in April. Belgian Waffle, which kind of gave birth to the Groad name of the podcast and why we're embracing it, is in early May. DK in May this year?
It's the
Is it?
last day, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, DK, end of May, early June. July, you have Crusher and the Tusher. August was Gravel Worlds, but now you have Gravel World, Steamboat. Yeah.
So what you just mentioned there, that rundown sounds like a pretty sweet gravel calendar for me.
Mm-hmm.
So why not just make a gravel calendar and have a series out of it?
Who's going to make this?
Yeah.
What do you
I don't
want
know,
to?
that's what
How much money?
That's what everybody always says to me for cyclocross. So I'm asking you. I'm the noob. Y'all
I
are
don't
the
know.
gravel people.
How much money does GROADIO have? Can we start the GROADIO National Gravel Series?
We could.
No,
Why
yeah,
not?
we could. Yeah.
Let's do it.
I think we just did it.
So we would have it would be kind of interesting because I think there is a diversity of races there. And, Amanda, you've seen it in some of the land runs and Dirty Kanzas that you've done. They can turn into a muddy mess where it takes a different skill set.
Well, let me
obviously, Crusher is completely different. I think it would be super interesting.
Let me rephrase this, Amanda. What if Lifetime continues to buy up different races and makes their own series? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is that something that would pull in all of these pros? Does that change the whole outlook of what gravel racing is? And it doesn't have to
think it would be
Lifetime. Somebody
awesome.
else does it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be awesome. It would. I was thinking as you were saying it, it's funny because in cross, because of points and the way that rankings are, that kind of everybody goes to the same events for points and stuff isn't really the same as all these big races on the gravel scene. It's more everybody's going to these big things because it's elevated at that point just based on a prestige level, not even just money and whatever. It's more of just notoriety and these are the big events that you go to. Whereas in cross, people will still split their schedules based on how they need to get points and all that. So there's different priorities and goals. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how the gravel series has manifested itself and people have just kind of said, okay, this is the big event. This person's here. Ted's gone and done this calendar last year, so I'm going to do that calendar next year. That's kind of how I think the series has evolved in that way. Is the bigger names that go, then the more elevated the importance of that race, and then it just keeps going from there. So maybe the next step really is just somebody saying, here's the series, here's the calendar. Maybe races are going to get some sort of ranking thing, or I don't know, maybe it'll just forever live in the subjective rankings on GROADIO, but we'll see.
So what then? So it seems like, at least if we use a cyclocross as a model, you're talking about it's different because people are racing for points, as we've kind of been discussing this year. The importance of points has been diminished over seasons past, whereas now it really, one of the main focus of getting points in cyclocross is racing for a better position or even qualifying for a national championship. Next question. Should there be a national championship? Should this be a sanctioned national championship?
No.
I'm using that S word.
No. Get out of here. No.
You don't think, okay, don't call it sanctioned. Somehow come up with it where you don't think people would want to, at some point, just the way cycling disciplines go, at some point race for a Stars and Stripes gravel jersey.
Well, I'm sure Zach's itching to tell you that's already a thing. Yes.
Wait, there's a Stars and Stripes?
Yes, there is. Are you serious? Yeah, if you Google like gravel grinder national championships, it's not USA Cycling. It's like some other underground sanctioned.
Well, I mean, there's a single
there's Gravel Worlds. You can get a rainbow
too.
jersey. There was Gravel Worlds. There's a World Championship.
Well, yeah, but so you can get a national championship. Like Panaracer sent their whole team to nationals, to gravel grinder nationals this year, but it's still chuckled at as like not actually an official thing, much in the same way that Gravel Worlds is chuckled at because it's not technically a real thing. So from the standpoint of like a series and people going to do these things so that at a spectator level we can all follow somebody throughout some sort of calendar, I don't think that will translate to any sort of like official thing that people are achieving for, I guess. Maybe. That's my opinion.
If I fall out of view here, it's because I'm in this rabbit hole that is the United States Endurance Cycling Federation.
There, I told you, that's it. That's the sanctioning body that decided to bring it on. Yeah.
All right, so
USCCF.
on GROADIO, one of our agenda items in the next coming season is that we are going to start a federation.
Okay.
All right. I mean, we may as well. It seems like anybody can do it. We're going to start a federation. We'll have to work on what the details are of that, but that's going to be the goal.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. I will say though, I think like we should definitely, if people want to have their race be, included, it definitely has to be like a postcard situation. If we're going to keep the spirit of gravel alive, it's got to be pretty low tech. You send in a postcard with the name of your race. Hopefully you send in a really cool postcard and then maybe we'll consider it.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm good with that.
That seems appropriate.
Gravel Grinder Nationals are in April. Mm-hmm. We're in April. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Interesting. Where was it?
You didn't know that was a thing, Zach?
I did. Now that you mentioned it, I neglected to cover it, I guess.
Right.
Where was it?
I don't know,
Lawrence,
but they got like a
Kansas.
website from the 80s. It's awesome.
Lawrence, Kansas.
It's in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I have a question for you guys. It seems like a few years ago in gravel, right? It was the interest level was who kind of came from a different discipline to do this race and won, right? And you'd be like, oh, this person. And so I looked at like Steamboat, and we had an interesting situation where we had a professional road racer came, did it, won on the women's side. And on the men's side, we now have more of Amanda joked offline about professional gravel racers. Ted King won for the men, and so we've been following him for the last couple years. Which is more interesting to you guys, having that de facto series where we have people who we follow and rivalries and races to compare, or the ringers who come in and do the one-offs and win races or compete? Because I think like doing a series is one thing, like Amanda pointed out, that would foster is having even more of a coherence of a narrative and these athletes that we can follow.
Yeah, but I think it's go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to ask you what your opinion is as the outsider looking in. What would you rather pay attention to?
I think it's apples and oranges. I don't think you have to choose. I mean, why would you want to choose? The people who I'm sorry, dear listeners, I'm going to continue to bring this back to cyclocross. That's just the way it goes. But the people who were racing for the men's 35 plus Masters series at DCCX when Katie Compton showed up and raced in their race, didn't care. They loved that Katie Compton was racing in their race. There was your celebrity that showed up, and other than hitting one barrier, probably would have won the race. Yet it didn't affect their series, and they still had a great series for the season. So I think that you can have both, and then if we get to the point when we make our federation an official thing and have the agricultural bodies giving us money for prizes are able to have a series purse, maybe some of those celebrities will think twice about just doing a one-off and come for more than one, and then you draw them in. So I don't think that they need to be mutually exclusive. I think you can have a cool series and have people show up and ringers show up and try to win it, and then the professional gravel riders, put them in their place.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And I think, comparing it to cross again as well, like when Annika Langvad showed up a couple seasons ago to race some of the World Cups in the US, it was cool to see somebody who was amazing in mountain biking come and try cross and like find out where they fall into that. And I think that's kind of what's happening this season with the gravel races is you have an unofficial series where a lot of the same people are going to be at, and then every once in a while these ringers will come in and throw a wrench into the mix and kind of see how things go, and it's fun to see where they fall and whether or not they can match up to some of these other people that are focusing on it a little bit more intensely. So yeah, it would be, I think that is probably what's going to happen in the future is there'll be some sort of series, official or unofficial, and every once in a while these big names are going to come in and kind of put their name in the hat and shake up the results a little bit.
And the thing about those big names, and especially, I mean, just looking at like the EF team, is those cyclists as a class aren't dumb, and they're pretty meticulous, and they kind of figure things out, and they're a little anal about training and how they race and all that. I will bet the more that Pro Tour teams start doing events like that, eventually they're gonna have the success. I hope it doesn't get to the point where when Radio Shack showed up to Leadville and just rigged the whole thing, where they basically had a 9-person team up there just to pace Lance so he could win the race. I don't know if we're going to get to that, but I think just as far as how those guys like Morton and all of them went about their race this year, I'll bet they learned a ton. And if they come back and do it again, it's going to be a different story. And
Yeah.
that more will follow in that, and then it's just going to be, I think, for the better. It will sort of change how those races are raced at the front end.
Yeah, for sure. I was watching the first day of the Colorado Classic with Brad Soner and Meredith Miller doing a back and forth a little bit, and they were talking about Steamboat. And Meredith said something about how some of these racers are coming because like their sponsors really wanted them to. And it got me thinking, that's, I think, where I would be a little bit sad is if some of these people are showing up because somebody's telling them they have to. That would bum me out a little bit because I think a lot of this has always been people intrigued about the adventure. But if somebody's going because somebody tells them they have to, like a sponsor company or whatever, that would, I think, ruin a little bit of that adventurous side of it for me. But besides that, yeah, I think it's going in a good direction.
We are at about 58 minutes. We've got a couple more items on this list. Is there anything that either of you are dying to touch on? Zach, anything on that list that we need to talk about that will not be evergreen by the time we do this again?
I thought it would probably make sense to talk about the Rift a little bit. That race looked pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's like out of this world.
What is the Rift?
So the Rift was a race in Iceland that went around an active volcano, and I guess kind of the backstory is if you've been on
the backstory is I want to go do the Rift.
Exactly.
And now you can tell me what it is.
Next year.
Dude, yeah, they sent photos, and I was just like, oh my god, like what? I was like, I've never seen anything like this.
I know,
but kind of the backstory. I think what was cool about it is if you've been around gravel races, you've seen the Loft Fork, which is kind of like this weird spring contraption. Bill, have you seen the Loft Fork?
That I have, yes.
Okay, so even Bill has seen the Louf Fork. So I saw one at a mountain bike race. A dude put it on his mountain bike for a Wisconsin mountain bike race. So
that's the first place I ever saw it.
I saw it. The first place I saw was Jingle Cross.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What?
Okay.
Yeah.
What?
I have some photos. I'll have to dig them up. It was from a number of years ago.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, Amanda, I think there's sponsor potential here for you. I'm just throwing it out there for cross season. I don't know if that's how that works, but if you want to make that pitch. No, so Lauf, the last couple of years, they've just totally embraced gravel racing, and their employees have been at races across the U.S. There was one of their employees was at the Great Gator Gravel Grinder in southern Florida, even. I was like, wow, they're getting around. So it's really cool to see how they've embraced gravel, and they've sponsored events, and they've done Gravel Worlds. And so they did their own party this year, and they invited a bunch of folks to go do it. And so a number of Americans got the chance to go race it. It was familiar names. Alison Tetrick won for the women, and Colin Strickland won for the men. So I don't know. It just seems like really cool. And I think if you haven't checked that one out, I guarantee you'll probably want to do it next year.
the Rift.bike. Just go to the Rift.bike. It looks freaking amazing. The scenery is just.
Yeah,
I just want to go.
Yeah.
I just want to go with a Barbie Jeep and a camera.
I know.
Yeah, and going back to when we're comparing a lot of this gravel stuff to Ironmans or triathlons, like destination Ironman racing is a thing, and you go and pick places and go to travel to it because you want to go there, and you kind of use the race as an excuse. And a couple years ago, David and I went to do the Dirty Reaver, which was in the UK. And after I came back from that event, I was telling people that I never thought that this gravel stuff would ever become destination racing until I did that event, because it was amazing. And it was so cool to go to this different place and do a race. And I said, coming back from that that's something that's going to happen in the future, is people are going to do this destination sort of racing with gravel, because you can go to these destinations that are otherworldly and totally different than anything that we have domestically. So it's cool to see the Rift get as much exposure as it did this season, because I think it's kind of opening the door to some of those different kinds of travel events, which I know Grinduro has started to do as well. They have events in Scotland and Japan. So they're trying to push that now, and I think it's definitely a direction that can happen in the future, the same way that Ironman did.
These lava fields look amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
But the one other thing that I wanted to mention besides that from the Rift, kind of the spin-off there, is this Grinduro, Gravel Duro style of racing. There's an event called Bleeding Kansas Gravel Duro that's coming up next month, and there was an event earlier this month called the Crooked Gravel in Colorado. And both of them, it got my attention because they have timed segments throughout the race. So it's not... They don't give awards for an overall. They give awards based on these different time segments throughout it. And both of those events in Colorado and Kansas say they took the idea from Grinduro, and that idea that there for Grinduro, a lot of those time segments are a little bit more of the downhill stuff, like taking off of enduro. But in this Gravel Duro style other events, they're just different, gravel long stretches of segment. It's not necessarily rowdy technical stuff. So I've talked to a number of people who have said that they really like this format because it takes away from the all-out sprint in the beginning and everybody's just going as hard as they can to get that result at the end of it. Instead, people are riding around and having a good time, and then you see the flag coming up for whatever time segment, and that's when you decide to go. And I think that could be another realm of this, alternative gravel racing, where it's going to get even more of the everyday people, because if you take a few time segments and you're scored over a period of I don't know, if it's a 6 or 7 minute overall, that puts somebody like me at a much closer position to somebody like Payson than 12 hours. So right. It's kind of cool, and I've heard people say that it makes it a lot more fun because it puts the average person even closer to a professional time split, basically.
I like that a lot, and I think that that it's one of the reasons that enduro has caught on in the mountain bike world too. And I think for this, Zach, the thing that I think has made this something that people can wrap their heads around is everybody's used to Strava now. Everybody's used to like, oh, you're out on your ride and you're just chilling out, and oh, I know there's a segment here, and then you're going hard. And if you're actually racing in real life with that kind of race structure, I think it's pretty cool. And I think it does exactly what Amanda was talking about, where you can sort of regroup and you can sort of meet people and sort of hang out, and then, know that sometime down the road it's going to get serious again, and then you're off and racing. So I love that. I think that's a really, really cool concept.
Yeah.
What I think is really cool, we've probably mentioned it a few times, is that because gravel is unsanctioned, it is growing, and it is being put on at this grassroots level, is people are open to try all kinds of things. Grinduro did the way they did it, and pretty much everyone who's done Grinduro is like, oh my god, that's my favorite race ever. So there's clearly something there, which, Amanda, is what you're expressing. And so it's cool to see where a race in Kansas can be like, oh, we totally borrowed this idea, but we're going to put our own spin on it, and we'll see how it plays. And frankly, like, if it doesn't work one year, then the next year do something else. And so, I don't know, I think that it's still really cool that there are so many levels of gravel that you're seeing, grassroots. I just had a dude here where he's like, dude, we don't have much gravel here, but he's like, he threw out this race. He's like, let's go do this ride on bike path, crushed stone bike paths in March. And I was like, dude, we need to do that. So it's like just this thing that you can start with some buddies or some friends and just throw it out there and see what happens.
Yep.
So
basically, Bill, what are you going to do next season? You got to pick a gravel event now.
And not just drive around. I don't like actually ride it. All right. I'll have to explore where
Have
I
you
want to go.
ever done a gravel or alternative style racing?
Like no.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right, you listeners, we need some input. What should Bill do for his first event next year?
I will register as the curious noob.
Yeah. And then I have a second question for listeners. I have 2 cyclocross weekends that I know of gravel events that coincide with it. And I'm sure there's got to be a bunch of other local stuff, but I'm curious if people know of any other cyclocross race weekends that have a conjoined gravel event as well. I know Jingle Cross and Retzingetz, but I'm wondering if there are some others out there.
I feel like there are, but now I'll have to research that as well. Yeah, if people do want to get in touch with us, for now, easiest place to do it, feedback@cxhairs.com. Just throw GROADIO there in the subject, and I'll get that out to Zach and Amanda. And then also, if you're on Twitter or Instagram and you just want to use the hashtag GROADIO, we'll start checking those out as well. All right, guys. I think we did it. Thank you again for continuing to grow my knowledge of the gravel world. I'm sure there were many things I said that I'm still learning. So if you want to get a hold of me and tell me everything I got wrong, again, feedback@cxhairs.com. And I think that's it. Thanks, guys.
Oh. Yeah, you bet. And it sounds like maybe next time we might have to get Bill fitted for a gravel bike, so we might be able to have a little tech tie-in and talk about how we're going to get you ready for your big gravel ride.
Awesome.
All right.
Sweet.
We'll see you later.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
all for listening. Go check out everything else on the Wide Angle Podium Network, and see you next time.